All right. So was everyone able to find the wine? Was it difficult?
Well, it was hard to find the 2017.
That's fine.
But the 2018, and then there was a 2017 reserve that you told me to go with the 2018. So, but it seemed to be like the one. It was the Uruguay section of Benny's was like this small.
Yeah. Same with Total Wine. It's tiny. It's gonna be really.
So he was like, I showed him the picture. He's like, oh yeah, it's gonna be over here, and there's like this thing.
I couldn't find it at all, so I went rogue. I'm drinking rosé.
Really? You couldn't find it in yours?
Any of the walkable wine stores from my place.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
Wasn't a big enough order to deliver, so
I had to drive. I had to drive something. Yeah.
It's going to be hard to find all these wines all the time. I mean, it just is just the nature of the game. So, thank you everyone for trying.
I'm excited to taste it. I've never had one from Uruguay.
Yeah. Yes. It's a cool wine. It's going to be a great experience. All right. I guess we might as well get started, right? I think we're about 5 minutes into the hour. So, ready? Awesome. Oh, shoot. So someone asked earlier what the picture of this was and actually I went to Uruguay this winter and I went to Bodega Garzón, and that's where this wine today that I recommended everyone get is from. Bodega Garzón is in El Departamento de Maldonado in Uruguay, and it's a brand new winery, and we'll talk about it a little bit more later, but it's kind of it's like the flagship winery of Uruguay right now, which is really, really cool. But before we get to the wine, let's talk about the country a little bit. Not a lot of people know a lot about Uruguay, right? It's a small country. There's only about 3.5 million people there. So it's important, I think, that we level set before we go into the wine and go into everything else that we're going to talk about. One interesting thing about Uruguay is that it's actually ranked first in Latin America in having a stable democracy and literacy rate, lack of corruption, freedom of the press, size of the middle class, all that stuff. It's incredibly, it's an incredibly vivid economy and very stable economy. 90% of the people there are also of European descent. My amigos argentinos love saying that they are from Europe, right, Javi?
We're descendants.
Yes,
of European.
They're all descendants of Europeans.
A lot of people are their grandparents were for Spain. A lot of them were. In my case, I'm half Spanish, half French. So.
His last name's Maudet. But the same applies in Uruguay, and actually they have a higher percentage of Europeans, of people from European descent. So you go there, and it looks like the people look like they are just white, basically. They also are really big into renewable energy. I didn't know this. I mean, I didn't know a few things until I started listening to some podcasts and stuff. Renewable power is huge there. So 45% hydroelectric, 30% wind, 15% biomass. That only leaves 10% for fossil fuels. I found that really fascinating. And incredibly advanced. It's a small country, as I mentioned. It's only the size of Washington State, but it has a ton of coastline. This picture here on the left is actually from Jose Ignacio, which is right outside Punta del Este in Uruguay, and I took it actually this winter. Their main agriculture, or their main export their export commodity, I should say, is beef. 82% of their land is used for agriculture, so it is pretty much, they're almost like a monocultural society. Mono-agricultural is the word. I forget the word. But basically they have one main export, and a lot of their GDP is based on beef, which is kind of crazy. And then also same-sex marriage and marijuana are both legal there. So
they were the first country in Latin America to allow same-sex marriage.
I think it was in 2013, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. And they were ahead of us for that, which is pretty cool and pretty fascinating. All right, cool. So moving on here. There's not a lot of history about wine in Uruguay, but it really starts out with the Spanish, the same way, the Spanish colonialism coming in, and priests and the missions, right, all planting Spanish varieties. But really 1870 marked the year that the modern era of wine started in Uruguay. And that started with these people here you see that are Basque descendants, Basque immigrants, essentially. They introduced the Tannat grape to to Uruguay because the grape is actually found and grown commonly in the Madeiran area, the Basque country of Spain and France. In the 1970s, there was a turn towards finer wine. That used to be just bulk and jug wine, the typical wine story, right? Until you get really modernized. And now they have this Viticultural National Institute that works with state growers, and they work to build these economic plans to modernize and make the country more advanced in terms of wine production. So I think you guys probably remember last week we talked about, if you were here last week, we talked about being in between the 30th and 50th parallels. Most of the wine grapes grown in the world come between the 30th and the 50th parallels, are grown between the 30th and 50th parallels, both in the northern and southern hemisphere. Uruguay is between the 30th and 35th parallels in terms of latitude. So it's right on the edge of where you can really grow grapes. And it has a mostly Atlantic or maritime climate. So it's sunny, but it's also wet. And 90% of the grapes come from that kind of climate area. And if you guys actually remember, we'll talk about this a little bit more detail later, but if you were here for the Rioja and the Spanish presentation that I did, Albarino is a grape that they're finding a lot of success with there. And Albarino is grown in a region of Spain that's also sunny but wet, Galicia. The soil in Uruguay is mostly loamy on various configurations of clay and limestone. So clay and limestone, good drainage. That's what you're looking for in wine. You want grapes to be on soil that drains well. And when it comes to like the overall wine culture there, it's even though it's been around for a while, it's still pretty new. There are only 200 wineries right now. In comparison to Napa Valley, which is a very shockingly small region in the United States that still produces a lot of wine and is very well known, the entire country of Uruguay has less acreage planted to vine than they have in Napa, about half actually. So it's kind of fascinating and actually leads you to believe that as this country develops, they're going to be able to start producing a lot more and a lot better wine. So keep Uruguay on your mind when you're looking for wine. And then the grape Tannat, it is the national grape. It is not, like for instance, Chile. In Chile, Carmenere is kind of the national grape. Other countries kind of have their national grapes. Like you could say Cabernet is, I guess, California's or even the United States' national grape. But Tannat is actually the national grape here. It represents about a third of the total acreage planted and just completely dominates other varietals in terms of production and also renown, right? Some other varieties that are grown there are Cabernet Sauvignon. Dusky, what are you doing, bud? Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Petit Verdot, and as I mentioned before, Albarino. So we were talking when I got on here, I was talking with Charlie about his wine, and his wine we determined comes from one of the regions that's actually not mentioned here. It's on the left side by the river. So there's a whole bunch of regions here that I'm unfortunately not going to speak about. But Uruguay is divided into about five main zones. So you've got the southern, the eastern, which is where Charlie's wine comes from, the southwestern, central, and then the western riverside. Oh, sorry. I think Charlie's comes from the western riverside. My bad. These high quality regions, the more high quality regions are typically in the southern or southwestern zone. So you see where the red is, that's actually where the majority of the wineries are. It's on the coast, right? These places have Atlantic influence. So you have that cooling influence of the coast at night, which as I mentioned pretty much every week, you get the diurnal swings, which preserves acidity in grapes. So overnight, during the day, I should say, it gets pretty hot in these regions, and then overnight it cools down, and that helps preserve acidity in the grapes, so you get better grapes overall. And then one thing, of course, that they have in common is that they're close to the coast. If you look at Colonia there, that's close to the coast. There are a lot of wineries there. It's on the Rio de la Plata, but it is technically, it's an estuary, but it's a huge estuary, and you go there, it looks more like you're looking out at the ocean. Montevideo, obviously, right on the coast of the Atlantic.
And Rio de la Plata, I think, if I'm not correct, someone can Google this, but the widest river in the world.
Absolutely. Correct. Yeah, if you look there, it's a massive river, and it takes about an hour to get across in ferry, 45 minutes to an hour.
45 minutes from Buenos Aires to
Colonia.
Colombia.
Yeah. Not fun when you're hungover. So let's talk about Tanat, Uruguay's flagship grape. I mentioned before, it's originally from the Madeiran region of Basque Country, right on the border of Spain and France. It's probably most likely from France, but there's no proof of that. So let's just call it, border. Let's let them share it. The actual name comes from the word tannic. So if you've been here before on these calls, you know that tannic refers to the leftover, microscopic, I should say, pigments of grape skins and seeds and sometimes stems in the wine. And when you drink wine and your tongue dries out, you get that tannic. That's tannins on your tongue. So you get that tannic sensation, that drying sensation. The grape is a really thick skinned grape. So you're going to get a lot of tannins in the grape, and you're going to get probably some purple mouths as well. So just keep that in mind when you drink this. Maybe not a good idea to go out and date after you drink some Tanat. It's touted as a healthy grape, and again, that comes from the tannins. So you have a lot of antioxidants in the tannins. Resveratrol is one that's typically found in Tanat, and these are actually when people say, "Oh, red wine is healthy for you," well, that's why it antioxidants and stuff like resveratrol. In the past, it was a blending grape. So in its home, it kind of was astringent, and the flavor was pretty acidic, and it just was not the best standalone grape. And that's probably, to be honest with you, due to the climate in southwestern France and the Basque Country. But in Uruguay, as I said, it's found its home, and it's now a standalone grape. It's doing incredibly well, and you can actually drink it as a monovarietal drink. The typical flavors you're going to find, again, this is subjective. I say this every week. Of course, it's incredibly subjective what flavors you're getting from the wine. But typically, the flavors are black plum, licorice. I get a ton of dark chocolate and kind of mocha or like coffee grounds for me when I drink Tanat. Cardamom as well, and even kind of like a smoky or a flinty aroma. Anyone have any questions, by the way?
Yeah, how come we don't have a wine tasting like this? I want to be there.
This was from the winter when I went with my friends. This is actually Bodega Garzón, founded in 2016 by an Argentine billionaire, Alejandro Bulgarone. I can't pronounce that well. And the winery, even though it's so new, it actually won Wine Enthusiast Winery of the Year in 2016. And I honestly think that's due to the winemaker Alberto Antonini. He was head winemaker at the famed Italian winery Antinori. And if you guys have ever heard of Antinori, they make wines like Tignanello.
I just had that the other last month.
Yes. How was that, by the way?
Oh, so I wish it was a split. I wish I had the whole thing.
It was a half bottle?
It was a split that I had.
Okay.
But it was just unbelievable. It's a good bottle of wine. Yeah,
they're phenomenal. And this family, the Antinori family and winemaking and company, is the oldest winemaking family in all of Italy. I think they've been making wine since, if I'm not mistaken, 1200 something. Crazy, right? So they know what they're doing. And this guy came from Antinori, and he makes all the wine at Bodega Garzón. Dusky, no, I haven't fed him dinner. That's why I haven't fed my dog dinner. That's why he's whining so much.
Is he allowed a little piece of prosciutto? Is a little piece of prosciutto okay for the dog?
Yeah, a little piece of prosciutto won't kill him. Yeah,
right.
A little prosciutto for the doggy.
You guys want to see a little prosciutto action? Raise your hand if you want to see a little prosciutto action. There you go. That's it. All right, let's go. There it is. Boom.
He's a happy boy now. I'll feed him in a second, or maybe you can feed him in a second. But anyway, so they have over 1,000 plots that are planted. So plots are just basically 1,000 mini vineyards. And I think they're experimenting with over 20 varieties. We'll go through a few of them in a second. But they've blown away the wine world. They're LEED certified and sustainable. And I think, honestly, they're one of the best wineries in the new world right now. And if you look here at this picture, this is not near the coast. It's a little bit inland. It's a 45-minute drive inland, but it's close enough where you still get some of those cooling breezes. and it's a little bit higher altitude than you're going to get on the coast. So you have to go up some rolling hills as you get there. There's a ton of farmland on the way. And as you see, it's brand new and beautiful. All right, guys, that's it. There's not a ton of info out there about Uruguayan wine. So today's presentation was a little bit shorter, but does anyone have any questions, or has anyone been to Uruguay?